Hello and welcome back to the FloTrack podcast. It is Monday, October 5th. My name is Lincoln Shrike. He is Kevin Soley. It's the day after a very strange London marathon. I think you can definitely say the most anticipated marathon event of 2020 because it's basically all we've had other than Tokyo, which seems like 6 decades ago. Kevin, the weather was really inclement. The results were not what we expected, at least on the men's side. And Eliud Kipchoge is no longer the world's best marathoner. Or wait, maybe we should talk about that. We have a lot to get into. What was your reaction to yesterday's 2 races?
Well, I'll disagree with the last part of your statement there, but everything else you said was spot on. Other than Bridget Kosgei dominating, nothing went to plan. Nothing was as we expected it. And obviously, even if Kipchoge won the race, we'd have plenty to talk about today because from the last time we recorded last week, Bekele dropped out of the race, but that seems somehow to be the 5th biggest story now that the race was actually run. It was wild. It was completely wild.
So on Kipchoge's side, well, I guess I should say up top, we're going to be grading everyone's performance, at least the big names. I wanted to point out one thing when I was watching the race. If you would have told us, hey, the men's race is going to come down to a full-on sprint in the last 20 meters between a Kenyan and an Ethiopian, I think we would have been salivating. We would have been saying, oh my gosh, Bekele finally matched Kipchoge, and then you hear that the Ethiopian won. You said, "Oh my God, what a race! We got exactly what we wanted." Except for the fact that it was Shira Katada and Vincent Kipchumba, and Bekele dropped out 2 days prior, and Eliud Kipchoge was a minute or so behind. It was totally unpredictable. I do want to start with the men's race, and I feel like we have to grade everyone. So even those who didn't show up for the test, we have to grade. What grade, and I'll put you on the spot, I have one in mind, but what grade would you give Kenenisa Bekele for withdrawing from this race?
You could say incomplete because he didn't run it, but it's an F. It's an F. He didn't run the race. He dropped out. This has been an issue throughout his marathon career. I think when we got the news on Friday, anybody who was surprised hadn't been paying attention. It was more like, oh, okay. You had talked about it. Other people had talked about whether or not he was going to even finish the race. And that didn't just extend to the race itself, but I think that also indicated the point prior to the race, those final 2-3 days that are always in between when the press conference is and when they go to the start line. You always see people drop out. This is in the context of Joshua Cheptegei potentially taking his 10K world record in 2 days. This is in context of Kipchoge finally being mortal. This would have been his chance. This would have been his best chance to beat him. And he wasn't there. He might have a good reason for why he wasn't there. He said it was an issue with his calf, but it's still an F. And I go back to kind of what I said in the spring when this was called off, Lincoln, not to quote myself, but I'll quote myself here.
There you go.
Every moment that passed, it decreased the likelihood that this matchup was going to come to fruition. And I didn't think it would I thought it would just be on the Bekele side. Turns out it was both Bekele and Kipchoge. But his 201.41 was lightning in a bottle. He caught it last year in Berlin. That there's no guarantee that he's going to ever duplicate that performance again. And now we saw him regress back to the mean in the marathon, which unfortunately for him means either underperforming or not even getting to the finish line.
Yeah, I gave him a D- and just a higher grade slightly because his career record in the marathon against Eliud Kipchoge did not get worse here. But you're exactly right. The biggest takeaway here is he missed his opportunity to beat Eliud Kipchoge. Now, maybe he truly did. I assume he did everything to get on the start line, and he showed up knowing this was in the back of his mind, if you think good intentions. And he just said, it's a 50-50 shot, and I'll give it my best, and I'll go to the press conference. And then, but we've just seen this too often from him to think that, I don't know. I hate to question someone's motivation, but you couldn't even get out on the start line. You couldn't even like just give it a shot. I mean, what's the harm? And what is he, 37? So what are we worried about? He's gonna like tear his calf, and then what? He's not ready for, I guess you could say, the Olympics. But this is it. This was his Olympics in the marathon. Like, this is all you have left to prove. Yeah, he could get a medal in the Olympics, but when it like we all know that a major marathon performance is bigger deal than the Olympics as far as the fields that are concerned. And this was a unique opportunity. And yeah, he's got to be absolutely kicking himself with his good calf for missing this chance. He gets a D- and a note to from the teacher to talk to his parents, because this is just absurd. I understand he's struggled to stay healthy, and I also understand the marathon's a tough distance here. But come on, we hyped this up forever. The London people did so much. If he was healthy enough to travel, to get into the bubble, to warm up ostensibly, to do his shakeouts a couple days before, just give it a shot. Did the thing just like tighten up? Did he trip over his bed? I don't understand. We'll get into the race. I guess I shouldn't harp so much on him, but just not even showing up to the start line, I think is another indictment on his marathon career. He's something mentally feels like it to me is psyching him out in this. Now, maybe he just got an injury because he's 37 and he's been running at a high level for 20 years. But this is embarrassing. I couldn't believe it I could believe it, but I couldn't believe it. This is outrageous that he couldn't even make it to the start line.
Yeah, I guess what's worse, scratching the day before or getting 10K through and then pulling the plug. I don't know. I think we still would have been harsh on him either way. And I believe that the injury is legit. I'm just, it doesn't mean you can't fail though. That's part of it, is getting ready and being set to go. When you look back at how this race was run, obviously it didn't take 2:02 or 2:01 to win it. Would that have played to his favor? Maybe he was a little bit not in the best form because this issue was plaguing him throughout. But I'm with you in terms of like, what are you waiting for? It seems like if you wait for the perfect situation to run a marathon, you'll never run a marathon. That just seems something that goes along with the distance. So yeah, I don't get it. I guess it's let's save ourselves for one last push towards the Olympics and hope that goes well. But I mean, there's no guarantee that that's going to go his way. And then after that point, what are you saving yourself for? At a certain point, just go for it. Just go for it and see what happens.
Well, if you are trying to quote, save yourself for the Olympics, I mean, a guy, Shira Katada, just improved his standing for the Ethiopian Olympic team. Desisa is a fantastic championship runner. Yeah. So, I mean, it's no guarantee by pulling himself. I mean, he knows this, right? But by pulling himself from the race, it's like, wow, I'm saving myself for the Olympics. He wants to extend his career like anyone would want to, but I think he was better served just giving it a shot. But that's just my opinion. Okay, we'll move on to Kipchoge, and I do want to talk about the winners because they deserve some chat. But this race will be remembered for what happened to the hyped up matchup between Bekele and Kipchoge. Kipchoge seemed, obviously fine through halfway. Seemed okay through I don't know, 30K, and then the wheels started to kind of go off. I want to give him two grades. One, Eliud Kipchoge, 85 or 95% of his body. Eliud Kipchoge all the way up to his ear, and then I give his ear a separate grade. So we'll start with his ear. I got to think that's an F. The ear was not ready for game time. No, separately for Kipchoge. I don't know, a C-. He was there. It really seems. I know he's not a guy for excuses, but this looked like he was fine going with the pace. And then I just, for someone who's so experienced, and I don't want to be an apologist, someone who has done this over and over again, for him to say my ear blocked and it caused me issues, I tend to believe him and think this was a fluke thing that just hadn't happened to him yet. But he'll be back. This was just finally the chips didn't align perfectly for the first marathon in 14, 15 tries.
You're a easier grader than I am. He's won everything since 2013. 12 marathons in a row, been perfect. I'm not going to give him an F because he finished the race and he looks to be in one piece, but I'm going to go D here. I don't understand the ear thing. I thought I misheard it. I thought I misread it. I watched one interview and he said it and he pointed to his ear. Then I saw another interview with the BBC's Gabby Logan where she actually followed up and said, oh, so like in the lead up, I think she was wondering what we were wondering, like, oh, maybe he has some congestion in his body. And he said, no, just during the race, my ear got blocked. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means. I don't know why that impacts.
Hold on. Let me just interrupt here because I have some experience here because I've recently come off a cold. And
he didn't say he had a cold,
Kipchoge didn't have a cold. No, I'm just saying. He didn't have a cold, but he was out in 50-degree weather when it was raining. And so cold-like symptoms, you're going to get a runny nose, right? You're going to some things are going to start to happen. It's strange for someone who's been so good for that to be what befall, what leads to your downfall. Not this is going to be a permanent downfall. This could be a one race thing. But I will say, you get that and it's a little disorienting, and it may have been tough for him to mentally get past that. I would have thought he would have been capable of that, but I think it was
impacting his breathing. What?
Maybe. Maybe. I mean, do we have any, we really have this be a truly informative podcast, we needed to get a nose, ear, and throat doctor on here. I wasn't able to secure that person for today's pod, so I apologize to the listeners. But it's tough because you want to just say, wow, Kipchoge got beat and it was an ear. He must have psyched himself out. I do think there's something to it that he mentioned it. I think it was disorienting, and it may have, his cadence may have been off, and it may, let's be honest, it may have mentally just shook him, and he may have not been having a good day before that period. Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of things. It's very tempting as a commentator. It's very tempting to look at this and be like, to do the usual. Well, it was a pandemic race. His rival dropped out. It was cold. And then he got a little congestion. I mean, just throw this thing in the trash can. Come on, this didn't really count. It's tempting. No, I'm not going to do it, but it's tempting.
I'm gonna count it, but I'm also going to be asking some follow-up questions about the ear issue. I think because then he also talked about he felt tightness and all that other stuff, which that's called running a marathon. And when everybody says, he complained of hamstring tightness at mile 24. Well, that's what happens when you run a marathon. That's like a swimmer saying they got wet when they got into the pool. That's just something that's going to happen. I think it was a combination of things because when I rewatched the race, I watched it from the perspective of I knew he had gotten beat because I did not watch it live. There was a couple points when he was motioning to slow it down to the pacer early on. They were chatting a bit with the pacer, which I thought was noteworthy. I didn't see, maybe you saw it when you rewatched it. The last 30 minutes, I didn't see him get a bottle. And I don't know if he missed a bottle. I don't know if he forgot a bottle. So maybe, that could have had something to do with it. Maybe the ear led into that because he didn't hear somebody yell bottle station coming up. Or again, it was just so, it threw him off. And the weather, different people react well to the different types of weather on that day. Just because you run good in cold weather once doesn't mean you're always going to run good in cold weather. He was shaking visibly after the race, although a lot of athletes were as well too. So I think it was the marathon. I think it was just this combination of bad things, but it's not like here's what's interesting to me. He didn't fall off completely. Right?
Yeah.
He got dropped. He got dropped at mile 23. And granted, it was a slow lead up. They went through in 63 they were supposed to go through in 61. A lot of that probably was they were deferring to Kipchoge. Maybe they could have beat him by more, but he got eighth. But was less than a minute behind. And he lost that minute in the final about 2.5 miles. It was before mile 24 when he dropped out. Maybe 23.5. I don't know the exact spot. So losing a minute in the final 2.5 miles, that's not a ton. We've seen people crater much worse than that. So I don't think it was that. I don't think he was that far off. And I think he'll be fine. moving forward. I just think there was enough issues right there that led him to that. I think if he was feeling 100%, I think he would have gone hard at 30K.
Yeah.
And he didn't, because I think he was feeling it.
And maybe, yeah, like you said, from the beginning of the race, just didn't quite feel good. I mean, 62.54 is such a far cry, even considering the weather. And you're pointing out that he's trying to get the pace slowed down. I think is a good point.
He's going like this. He's going like this. I mean, I didn't have audio in there, but he was visibly, like, the commentators were saying he was asking them to pick it up, but I don't know anybody who puts their hands down as a motion to speed things up. It's usually the opposite. There was at one point about, I think it was an hour 15 into the race, he took a look behind him and there was 8 dudes there, 7 dudes with him. And I think he thought, okay, we haven't dropped anybody yet. And I think, he's just looking at all these guys are right on my heels and we haven't winnowed this field at all. And again, you watch it back with a different perspective than you did live, but everything else looked fine. Nothing looked out of the ordinary. But maybe at that point he was thinking that they were going a little quicker than they were, because this should have been a manageable pace for him. And he's never run this slow other than Rio. This is the slowest he's ever run a marathon.
Right. Yeah. Still ran 206. I mean, I 206 long shot from 201 and very long shot from 159.40. But last time he finished 8th or worse in a race period, obviously never in a marathon, the famous 2012 Paris 5,000 meters. I was 21 years old and could not pretty much grow facial hair. So it's been a bit. It's been a while ago since he finished 8th.
Was that the one where everybody ran like 12:50 and 12:40?
Yeah. That's the that was the before. Yeah. Gebra Meskel and Gebra the other
Gebrawet.
I don't know, the other Gebrawet. There you go. That was the pre-Brussels 2018. That was our best 5,000 that basically we had in the 2010s before that one. Is Kipchoge still the favorite for the Olympics to you?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, is it? Can we just put this one in the trash and just say he finally had a bad one, and so it's not impossible, but it's still highly unlikely, because it seems like a lot went wrong, and maybe somebody else would have dropped out, or somebody else would have fared much worse. And sure, he benefited probably from a lot of people deferring to him early in the race. So perhaps he would have lost by a lot more if everyone would have said, well, let's screw this. Let's just run let's run 62 at least. Like, let's not go out this slow. So his margin of loss may have been, smaller, just given his reputation and what everyone expected. But, so how much less is he a favorite to you at the Olympics compared to, assuming that'll be his next race, because he races so infrequently, how much less of a favorite is he for you than he would have been otherwise if he would have won?
I mean, if we don't see any races from him between now and when he steps on the start line to the Olympics, it's going to depend what other people do. He's less of a favorite because we've actually seen it happen now. We can actually conceptualize it. And more importantly, people who are running against him have seen it, and now they believe that they can beat him. But I don't think you're going to take one loss after 12 consecutive perfect marathons and you're going to wait the one loss. No, we know marathon, oftentimes there are these isolated events that happen almost in a vacuum. I think he'll be fine. There was enough that I saw. He's not completely out of it. He'll be fine. He's still the favorite.
Yeah. All right. So we talked a ton about Kipchoge. I mean, I could do a whole podcast about his ear probably. But let's move on. Let's go straight to the top of the leaderboard. Shura Katada, very talented marathoner. Not the guy I would have thought would have been the one to win this had Kipchoge and Bekele faltered. I thought that would have been like Garamu's position, maybe Washihoon's, but credit for him for running tough. You got to give him an A+, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And he was the last man in that pack for a really long time. And it almost looked like he was going to get dropped because he was so laissez-faire about where he was. He sort of occupied that Mo Farah in the 10K position back there. Real smart, though. that finishing kick, he rallied, he got overtaken, and then came back. And this isn't his first rodeo. He's run second in London before. But to bring it back to Kipchoge, because it's been 20 seconds since we've mentioned him, part of the reason why I'd keep him as his favorite is that was a blanket finish. Any one of those top three probably could have won. Leme, Kipchumba, or Kitata. They were separated by 4 seconds. And even Garamu and Wasserman on a different day could. I just feel like when a marathon comes down to a kick, it's almost like it's a crapshoot. It's a crapshoot, and it's not like, oh, this person's smart, man. They made it tactical. It's not like the 1500 on the track. Yeah. You never know how you're going to react after that long. So part of the reason why I'm still thinking Kipchoge is a big favorite for gold is no one emerged from this. Like Kitata, if Kitata went and ran 2:03 and beat everybody by a couple minutes, then you're like, oh, you're in trouble. But instead, I feel like it's just Kipchoge versus the field. Kitata happened to get it done today, but we haven't seen anything that's separated any one of these guys from the rest of the field to be the main challenger to Kipchoge.
Certainly not. No, I would agree. I will say Kitata had, we think back to 2018, he got second to Kipchoge, ran 2:04, lost by, 30 seconds. But, he's had some moments where we kind of thought he would emerge, not as a Kipchoge challenger, but as maybe somebody on the
but they've all had
on the
that,
level
right?
of like a Cam War or somebody like that, and he still has yet to do that. They all have had that, yes, of course. But even if this ends up being the highlight of his career, I mean, he's the second guy. I guess you could say 7 guys beat him, which is true, but he's the second guy to dethrone Eliud Kipchoge, and the first since he's been this otherworldly, one of the best athletes of all time. So if that's his legacy, good on you, Shira Kitata, because that's pretty solid. I do think he has a lot to offer. Do I think he's going to be a world record breaker? Probably not. I think the weather suited him perfectly, and the fact that he was kind of able to linger. I think he was kind of tracking Kipchoge. That was because he was behind Kipchoge at certain points. It was kind of like, well, if I follow him around, I've got a pretty good chance to win. And obviously he had to get going once Kipchoge fell off. But yeah, you're right. You look at him and you watch the race differently, of course, because you know who wins. And you're like, oh, wow, he's way back there. Smart from him. I mean, he ran a very, very intelligent race. And when it turned tactical, that benefited him greatly. The guy who's run well in New York, who's finished second, a lot of things fell right for him. And it doesn't suddenly make him the Olympic favorite. Of course, we still have Kipchoge. And there may be an Ethiopian that finishes ahead of him. There's no guarantees in the marathon, and he's not immune from the struggles of a race. But he has been good for quite a while, and you hang around, and you're a guy. He's consistent. He finishes races, which is crucial. Consistently finishes, not a dropout king like a Kometo or Bekele. And something good is bound to happen. And you're right. It was just a roll the dice type of moment. He looked beat, I thought, in the last 100, and then he had something left. I liked your text. In all respect to him, he looks like a soccer player who's transitioning to cross country. He doesn't have the smoothest form, right? He kind of runs heavy, and but he got it done. A+ for him, and he can skip a grade too. He gets to jump straight to high school.
Yeah, when I told you reminded me of a soccer player whose coach made him go out for cross country, I meant that in a complimentary way, like a guy who goes out and then all of a sudden he's like the second best kid on the cross country team, and all the cross country kids are jealous. Like, man, this guy didn't do any miles in the summer. He's got this weird stride, but he just has so much aerobic fitness that he's able to get it done. Rewatching it, you'd think Kitata is the guy who gets dropped and Kipchoge is the guy who wins, just because Kipchoge had positioned himself in the pack throughout the race as somebody who looked like he was in control, and Kitata was just hanging out in the back. Yeah, he could develop into the guy. I'm just saying, in this race, he didn't really separate himself from everybody else. Now, it was so tactical for the beginning part, he didn't have a chance, but he could have made a move with a lap to go or half a lap to go and won this thing by, I mean, he wasn't going to win it by a minute, but even in that tactical setting, he could have done what Kipchoge did to Guyadola in Berlin that year and just come back on him and then put 10, 15, 20
Yeah.
seconds on him. But instead it came down to a kick. Every race is different. I'm just saying, if you're Kipchoge and you're looking at this, you're thinking, okay, well, there's still no main competitor for me. It was supposed to be Bekele. He's on the ropes. Katata's pretty good, but I mean, everybody else was right with him. So I just got to get back to where I was, and then I'll be fine.
Right. Yeah. So A+ for him. Like I said, he gets to skip a grade. I think he's probably, albeit how difficult it is for East African nations to pick the correct athletes, I think he's probably secured his spot at the Olympics. But we shall see. Now they're not Athletics Kenya, but it still is, it's not a guarantee. But I would assume he is going to be on the start line in Sapporo. Moving right along, Vincent Kipchumba. If he would have won, this would have just been absurd. I mean, good marathoner, but like has never done anything, made any noise in a major. I totally did not see this coming. I mean, he had the race of his life to finish second. I don't. Let's see. I say he's never made noise in a major. That's because he's never run a major. A major marathon debut, and you almost win the stinking London Marathon. I got to give him an A, just not an A+ simply because he didn't win, but fantastic race from him.
Yeah, I'll give him an A. I'll give the first part of his kick an A+, and the second part of his kick a C. And if he was able to put those two things together, he could have won the thing. The more I think about it, the more this race reminded me of a Dubai marathon. If we have marathon super fans out there, they'll know what I'm talking about. Where now the times usually in Dubai are a little bit quicker in this, but then it always kind of comes down to a whole bunch of people, and in that group you have a couple people you've heard of and are familiar, even if you're following the sport really closely. But then a couple people like a Vincent Kipchumba, where you're like, oh wow, they're having the race of their life, because everybody's just taking a shot and taking big swings. And credit to him for being there. Didn't quite have enough to close the deal, but I mean, when you lose by a second in a marathon, I don't think you'd be too upset.
No, definitely not. No. A for him, and then we move to the third place guy, the third wheel of the last final desperate sprint, Sisse Lima. He'd run 2:03 before. He gets third here. Just didn't have the wheels at the end. I'd say a B+ or an A-. I'll go A-. I'm feeling charitable.
Yeah, I know I just said you can't be mad if you lose by 1 second in a marathon, but if you lose by 4 seconds in a marathon like Lema did, inexcusable. D.
Yeah,
he was fine. Now he did a lot of leading, and I wonder if he thinks back to it. Maybe I could have kept my powder drier. Then again, Katata led in the end when it was really important towards those last miles, so that could just be overanalyzing. But yeah, you give Lema a B+, I think.
We will save everyone else from the 4 through 7 finishers from grades. We'll just assume they all get Bs. Do we want to move on to the women's race?
Sure. We can grade. Do you want to grade Jared Ward, top American, the only American?
I was going to say that.
Okay.
It was clear with him. Yeah, we can do that. I was going to be nice and maybe spare him from that. But it was clear going in that there was going to be a narrative around this. If it didn't go well, that he only had 8 weeks to prepare, and that is 4 weeks shy or a month shy of his usual buildup. It did not go well for him. He did end up getting lapped, so he did not meet his goal. 2:12.
I don't think he did. Did he get lapped?
Did he get lapped? Did he not?
I don't think he.
Oh,
no, I don't think he did.
Oh,
you'll revise revise that statement right now.
Well, here's the thing. Here, I want to make it. Let me make a little bit of a amendment to what I was talking about. The broadcast wasn't great. And listen, I know it's a challenge here. They weren't, they weren't able to be there on site, and they're trying to monitor a lot. It was jarring to watch this. There was a lot going on. They were showing the British pack, probably because it included Mo Farah pacing. First off, I thought Mo Farah was going to pace the main group. Did they really need Mo Farah out there jogging to try to run to help guys with an Olympic standard? There was too much going on. I just assumed he got I just assumed he got lapped. My mistake.
I'm looking at his tweet right now. It says, "I haven't felt like that since my first marathon. I'm going to train a little longer next time, but hashtag didn't get lapped. Congrats,
Okay,
Katada."
my bad. My bad. Uh, it was hard to follow this race for a lot of reasons, but we didn't get to see Ward a lot, obviously, and so that was part of the thing. So that spares him from maybe a harsher grade, but he didn't get lapped. Good on him. That was helped obviously by the tactical nature of this race. A 2:12 performance from him, a 2:12 be exact, 2:12:38. A C, a flat C from me. I would have expected better, but the conditions were rough, and obviously he didn't get a full chance to prepare.
Yeah, C was what I thought of. I think, yeah, he's a professor. He'll probably find that grade is fair. I mean, if you have a bad day in terms of conditions, a shortened buildup, and your default, if you're an American, is mid 212, it's not bad. That's not bad. I mean, I think the potential was there for more, but I don't think this wasn't a fast day for most people. There were select fast performances, but the top of the women's race wasn't particularly fast. The top of the men's race wasn't particularly fast. I think they had designs on it being quicker, but the weather did not allow for that in most cases.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
212 for him. Emmy coming off of a DNF or not a DNF, but sorry, now I'm getting all of my Ward facts wrong.
Yeah,
coming off of a bad race at trials, I think that's pretty good. I mean, if you're an American and you're defaulting to 212, so C.
Yeah, got it. All right, we'll move on to the women's race. Bridget Kosgei, we didn't challenge the women's only world record like maybe thought to be possible. Not for lack of effort. They went through in 68 and some change through the halfway. So it was nice and solid. But Kosgei just glided away from Chepnegich and just dominated the whole thing. You texted me and said it was kind of a boring race, save Sarah Hall, who we'll get to in just a minute. But as far as Kosgei goes, I just give her an A, maybe not an A plus because it wasn't a perfect day, but I mean, she just trampled this field. It was a dominant performance. She didn't necessarily even have to be her full best. Once the pacers dropped off, I think it was in both the athletes' minds, why are we trying to crush this? It's just a fight for the win. Yeah. So the pace dramatically slowed down. They threw in a 5,000 or a 5K split over 17 minutes. I don't know if it would have stayed fast, who would have. I mean, I think it still would have benefited Kosgei more. This was always going to be her race, but not much drama in this one. Kosgei's still the overwhelming queen of the marathon. I know that there were some names missing from this. There was no Mary Keitany, of course, and some other athletes. But Chepnegich is not on the level of Kosgei. I think that was shown on Sunday.
Yeah, I would give her a straight like an A plus. Now, graded against her own standard, it would probably be something like a B plus or an A minus. Yeah. But she won this thing by 3 minutes and did not seem bothered at all by the weather or any of the conditions out there on Sunday. Yeah, pretty perfunctory effort. They went through it 68-ish and slowed down from there. I mean, the wheels completely fell off Chepnegich, and Kosgei just kept scooting right along. I know the second half was a bit slower. It would have been neat to see a women's only world record. I definitely think she was capable of that if the conditions were better. But she needs a little bit. She needs a little bit more competition too. If that's going to happen at some point, which is tough because women's only world record means there's only women in the race. So they got to figure out how to get a rabbit with her that long in the race to provide her some sort of company. But yeah, I would say an A for Kosgei.
Yeah. Probably the biggest surprise save Kipchoge was Sarah Hall's performance to finish second, and dramatically so to kick down Chepnegich in the race's final meters. I think this is probably an A plus for her, especially coming off of a DNF at the trials. She, in the second half, started playing Mario Kart and just picking off people one by one by one by one. She ran an absolutely perfect race. And I kind of thought, my thought with this was perfect for her as a serial racer. If her preparation wasn't ideal, that's not going to affect her as much as it would other athletes, simply because she just gets out there and swings for the fences at a lot of different races and goes for it. So I think this was a perfect situation for her, and the race plan was perfect. Goes out, relatively conservatively, and then is able to use the weather to her advantage to pick off athletes one by one, and the amount of confidence you gain from that. But to PR in this race when I don't think anybody else did, save for Molly Seidel, of course. I guess there are some athletes further down on the list who PR'd, but to PR and to get second for her, this was the race of her career thus far, and to be 36, 37, and to get a top three to get a top two at a major, first time since 2006 that an American's finished on the podium in London since Dina Castor won. This was absolutely a career performance, and one that we'll always associate with Sarah Hall. This was stunning and incredible.
Yeah, it's an A+ for Sarah Hall. She ran the first 26 miles like Des Linden, and then she ran the last 0.2 like Shelby Houlihan. You look at those early miles, it was clicking off splits. She was completely by herself, no pacers around. That usually spells trouble, but she was not bothered at all, and then started closing the gap, and then just unleashes the fury at the end. That final close was nuts, because when you saw that camera shot of how far she was behind Chepnegich, it didn't look like she had a shot. The commentator said, "Oh, that's probably too far," and just came through like she was crushing the end of a 1500. I mean, jaw was on the floor for that performance. But just as impressive were the miles that came before it, because she was doing it basically by herself and was rolling people up one by one by one. So a great performance for Sarah Hall, and on a very big stage, she gets an A+.
And look at her year. She broke 69 minutes at the beginning of the year in Houston for a half. Then she DNFs in Atlanta. Later in the year in August, she runs 68:18 in a kind of a time trial situation in Eugene for a half marathon, and then the 2:22:01 here to get second in dramatic fashion here. Do you think she would trade all of this year for an Olympic berth? And would she trade this performance for finishing? Because she desperately obviously wanted to make it in the marathon and would have had was a favorite to do so. Would you trade this performance for would she trade places right now with Molly Seidel if she could because this is to me this is worth an Olympic spot. I mean, this is obviously it's not you're not contending for an Olympic medal. I get that, and she probably will never again have that shot. But this is a performance to define a career off of, and you may not remember it on the level of let's say a top 5 finish at the Olympics, but I mean, will we remember this or Jared Ward's 6th place finish in Rio more? I think we will remember this. So this is certainly for somebody to answer back after a bad day in Atlanta, this is as good as it gets, and I almost think this. I don't know. It's going to be much easier to forget about the DNF. It's not going to sting as much now that she's come back with this effort.
I disagree. I think she'd still trade it for the Olympics, because it's not just what you do at the Olympics, it's what you did at the trials. And if she made the team, that means she finished in the top 3 at the trials. You may not remember Jared Ward's 6th place in Rio, which I don't know why you're just taking a bunch of shots at Jared Ward on today's show, Lincoln. It's very strange.
I'm just saying a comparable performance that we could expect for her on a good day at the Olympics is basically what I was. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, you also remember the fact that he made the team in LA that day behind Rupp and Meb. So it's basically 2 performances that you're talking about. Yeah, I think everybody wants to make the Olympics. That's the highest stage. The major marathons, we know that sometimes they're even better than the Olympics, but everybody wants to be able to call themselves an Olympian. Doesn't take any. Now, this is a nice substitute. This is a nice compromise, but I think she would have traded places with Seidel if it meant getting top 3 in Atlanta. Can I offer a grade for something different? A tangent grade here. People saying the US should revisit their Olympic qualifying procedure because Sarah Hall ran 2:22. They get an F.
Oh no,
they get an F.
That's a bad take. Yeah, that's a bad take.
I just,
no, I don't know who.
I mean, well, they were saying it on the broadcast, and they come to it from a British perspective, so that's fine. But it's like, can you believe she's not on the team? Yeah, she had a
Yeah.
chance to make the team, and she didn't
Yeah.
finish. Also, if they and then they start talking about, well, first two past the pole, and then you leave open a spot for somebody. Okay, well, if that's the case, then Tuliamuk and Seidel are on the team, and then you move Kipiego off. But I'm sorry, did something happen to Des Linden? Did something happen to Emily Sisson? Like, what's the guarantee that we would give it to Sarah Hall? Like that process, people think it's better and more equitable. It's just have it completely backwards. All it leads to is you just picking the performance that you remember the most, and it's just a way to respond almost to public pressure more so than picking a team. Everybody had a shot. I think she would agree with this too. Everybody had a fair shake. She didn't have it on that day. Doesn't mean she can't have a good run later, but we have to hear this stuff every time somebody who doesn't make the Olympic team goes on and has a good day.
Mm-hmm. Man, just what a career for somebody who's, may ultimately never be an Olympian. I know we associate so much, what's the value of a career if you don't make the Olympics ultimately? And I know it took her a while to come to the marathon, but she's had a lot of success recently in the marathon. I know it was, again, on the track, it never quite materialized to that level, but a long and very successful career for someone who may never, represent the U.S. on the Olympic stage.
She's run everything. She's run like every event.
I was being a little,
it's incredible.
Yeah, I was being a little facetious when I was saying she wouldn't trade it. I think she probably would trade it, but now she gets to go into next year, assuming that the marathon schedule, the majors schedules, starts to look normal again, and she can say, she can run 3 majors in 2021. This recipe works for her, this frequent racing. And if you fall, you get in one and you have a bad one, well, then I'll run another one in 8 weeks. I mean, she is able to do this, and where other people can't. And so she still has obviously plenty to give it in this distance, even at 37, which how many races she's done. So now, having run 2:22, you say, well, can I run 2:21 or faster in Chicago? Can I go back to Berlin? And you would think in good weather, she could certainly lower her personal best there. So there's still a lot for her to do. And it kind of clears up her schedule. Again, she would take the Olympic spot if she had it, but it clears up her schedule for 2021, where she can try to run 2 to 3 majors, or, maybe more. I don't know. And keep trying to lower this personal best. So there's a huge, huge day for her.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point about her being able to adapt better than other people. So I'd give your point there an A.
Thank you. I've had several other C- points, but that's okay. So Chepnegich gets a C+. I mean, she still finished on the podium, right? Can you give her a worse grade? She's got to be wondering, hold on. She's got to be wondering, can I get a normal weather marathon? I go from Doha running in the freaking desert to now it's 50 degrees and raining. Can I get a 60 degrees and a light breeze? Like, is that too much to ask?
Yeah, you're right. You can't drop her much lower than a C, but I mean, she completely fell apart. She was there with Kosgei, and then it just all ended very quickly. But she stuck in there. She finished. Chariot dropped out. Bekele and Rigetu were farther behind. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you with a C. That sounds right.
Okay. Again, I'm going to do the same thing, just on time constraints. We'll skip the Achete Bekele. Is her last name Bekele?
Bekele.
And the 5th place finisher. Let's jump to Molly Seidel, who had a really, really nice follow up to her 2nd place finish in Atlanta. 2:25.13, didn't get lapped. Was always obviously part of the goal. What do we give her? I go with an A.
Yeah, I think you give her an A, and I think if you took Sarah, like if you replace Sarah Hall's name with Vivian Chariot, and you're like, man, Molly Seidel got 6th and ran 2:25. Like, she beat some people. She beat everybody she was supposed to beat, and she didn't lose to anybody she wasn't supposed to lose to. That's an A. I think the only reason why you'd be swayed is because you'd have this top American mindset, and you think, okay, well, Sarah Hall beat her by 3 minutes. Well, no, we just said Sarah Hall had an A+ day ran the race of her life. That doesn't change what Molly Seidel did. We were talking, Jason and I were talking on the House Run podcast last week, over under Top American. I think we put the line at 7.5. Now, obviously, Hall blew that out of the water, but Seidel was the under as well, too. On that tough of a day, this is, again, just her second marathon, running 2:25:13, again, beating some people she wasn't supposed to beat and staying ahead of everybody else. That's an A. That's an A for Seidel. I think she's going to be a good spot heading into Tokyo next year. I'm interested what she does in the spring next year. Does she try to run Boston, another tactical race? Does she do something different? Does she just kind of lay in wait, do some half marathons, and make sure that she's healthy for Tokyo? But whatever she's doing, it works for her.
Pretty solid first 2 attempts at the marathon. I don't think you can get too much better, save maybe Jordan Hasay, but on the level of where she's done it and the situation she's had to overcome with the pandemic and this being a unique race, and obviously finishing second in her debut, fantastic, and deserves nothing but the highest of praise. And she may have, not saying she was ready to run 2:22 and be with Sarah Hall, because she wasn't, but I assume she was conservative and saying, we need to have a good effort here. This will be a building block here. So to run a personal best in that weather, and I understand the Atlanta course was 3 times harder, if not more than what we saw yesterday, but for her to do that in the weather, and in her second try in the marathon, you take away the maybe the beginner's luck. She now knows what she's in for. No, she knocked it out of the park once again. So a great race from her, and it's a more encouraging signs for her heading into the Olympic Games, that okay, she's not just somebody who caught lightning in the bottle, like you said earlier. She's an experienced marathoner who knows what she's doing, and this is for sure her best distance. She showed that again on Sunday.
Yeah, I think she should stick with it. I think she got a future in it.
Yeah. Stay with the marathon. I'm sure her coach didn't say that, so we're giving her the best advice. Any other grades that we're missing here, Kevin?
London weather, I'd give an F. Ambiance, I'd give a C. Honestly, I think they should have pumped in some crowd noise. I think that would have helped. There were some really quiet spots near the course. I know they put the cutouts of people. I think they should have lined the thing with television monitors and had people watching on Zoom, like they have for the NBA playoffs, all the way around the course. It's only a mile and a quarter, right? If you put me on a screen, I mean, how many 55-inch LCD screens do you need? Actually, let's make it 155-inch. Let's go real big here, or drive-in movie size, whatever that is. How many do you need to circle the entire course? But at least get some audio in there. I think could have helped a little bit.
I enjoyed the cutout, and listen, I think the cardboard cutouts, we've probably seen enough of those, but there's just been so much effort across the globe with the cardboard cutouts, and man, those printing companies are just thriving right now. That I think everyone assumes, well, we got to do the cutouts, right? And so they had the humor, they had the Queen there, some other, I think some famous, I think maybe a Paula Radcliffe cutout. I can't be sure. I'd have to go back.
They had a Kipchoge cutout.
They did, yeah, a little biased, and I do want to give one more grade, and kind of explain it. Hugh Brasher, the race organizer, the race director, he gets a B-, and here's how his thing went. If this was a school project, he had the master of a school project. It was a perfect school project, and then literally he forgot it at home, and it's not through his fault. Maybe his brother distracted him on the way to school or something. I don't know. But I was thinking of the LeBron James meme or the GIF where LeBron is mouthing "What the F." That's got to be what Hugh Brasher felt like on Friday and then into Sunday. He's like, I did all this, and this is the result. Shira Katada won this. No offense to Shira Katada, but I mean, we organized this for this Herculean, this massive matchup. And one guy gets 8th, and one guy doesn't even make it to the start line. So he left his school project at home. He gets a B-. He passes still, because everyone knows how well he did to organize this and put the names in the field. But from where this was, I don't think you can look on this on anything else on the men's side than a disappointment, because not just that one of those guys didn't win, but for this to be the way that Kipchoge fell and for Bekele to not even make it to the start line, it's a disappointment. I think from the hype, this race flopped a little bit.
Didn't we talk about this on Friday's episode or Thursday's episode for the men? And I was like, when Bolt lost, maybe I talked about this somewhere else. Bolt didn't lose to a guy who ran 9:57. Bolt lost because Bolt got worse, right? Bolt had a bad day, whatever it is you want to say. Like that it wasn't like somebody rose to his level on that day. He kind of went back to where the pack was. And that's what happened here with Kipchoge. If you take out the negative storylines, the storylines of people not running that well or dropping out, the memories of the race that I think that I'll have are Sarah Hall was wrecking ball kick, and the men's race being pretty close, coming down to the wire, because it's always exciting when there's a 1 second margin in a marathon. But other than that, like, you won't really remember Bridget Koskai's run just because it was so matter of fact and it wasn't a splashy time. You won't remember anybody's time. Like, there's no, I tend to agree with you. And if Kipchoge was to lose, you wanted it to be in a more dramatic, spectacular fashion. Like, if he got second in this race, if Kitata outkicked him, okay, wow, that would be incredible, an indelible image. Instead, he just came trotting through less than a minute behind with seven people in front of him.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I think we'll be talking about this one for a while. I have heard from my sources that Eliud Kipchoge's ear has finally popped, so he's feeling better and is going to go on a 2:01 marathon tempo run today to just flush that race out of his legs. No, I'm just kidding. Very strange circumstances around this one. And I think we'll be talking about this one all week until Joshua Cheptegei runs 25:30 in the 10,000. Yeah. So for myself,
I don't think we're going to be talking about it for a day longer. I think this was it for the marathon. Tomorrow we're previewing Cheptegei, and then Wednesday we get Cheptegei. Yeah, it's his turn.
Right. Well, it's your loss. I was going to do a full documentary on Kipchoge's ear, but whatever. Okay, for myself, Lincoln Strike, he is Kevin Sully. Thanks to Alon for producing. We will see you guys tomorrow.